human in the loop is kind of like in a car, the crumple zone. So when, there's an accident, there's a part of the car that actually compresses to take the damage. And in this case, to take the liability.
Leaders here, human in the loop, and think they've ticked the box on people's side of AI.
And it's not like a kind of a neat curve where you can see this is where AI is good and where the human is better, but it's jagged.
So if AI saves me 2 hours a day, it's at least 10 hours a week and maybe more. So what is expected to do with this freed up capacity?
I really believe that this is a lack of creativity. This is something where, there's not many businesses in the world where they cannot expand. And this is a great way to do that with people that know the business. And you have to have people on board.
Welcome to AI Made Simple, the transformation series. My name is Valeria Pilkevich, and I talk to global leaders, innovators, and practitioners who are shaping the future of work in the age of AI. I'm joined today by Dave Drodge. Dave is digital transformation and AI strategist with over 25 years of experience, spanning 7 industries at 7 countries. Most recently, he spent several years leading digital transformation at Roche, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, where he drove the adoption of AI across daily workflows and enterprise processes. Before that, he held global digital leadership roles at Novartis, WWF International, Sony, and Amadeus. Dave is an AI advisor to Basil Peace Office and a contributing author to an upcoming book on how generative AI is reshaping the way we work. He's now lecturing on AI and digital at Northwestern University in Switzerland and bringing his hard-won enterprise experience to the next generation of leaders. His philosophy: be human, not just human in the loop. Dave, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate the invite and great to be here.
Amazing. Dave, you've built such an unusually broad career across countries, industries, agency life, global organizations, and now also academia. Can you take us a little through that journey? What were some of the defining moments that shaped your perspective on transformation and maybe the role that technology plays in it?
Yeah, great. So, I've worked in digital for over 25 years. And I started out when the web was just coming of, presence of interest. And so at that point in time, myself and a friend started a web agency because we were interested in the technology and really believed that could change the world. Looking at that now, it's a case that's even more so. And we couldn't have imagined where AI has brought us. So across that journey, I've really been like a digital lighthouse keeper, really kind of guiding organizations through each wave and giving them, like, for instance, some expertise in my side to how we can actually navigate those different waves. So I think for me, one of the big ones as well was e-commerce. And I work for a company called Amadeus, which is a background, what they call a global distribution system. And at the time, it was disrupting, travel agents, because we used to have to go and speak to someone and say, can you book this travel for me? And on the one side, we had a travel website where you could actually plan your trip. And then we had Checkbox as well, where you could actually go and actually find out your itinerary and download your e-ticket. So, those times, it was actually quite revolutionary times from that point of view. And over my career as well, I've worked in nonprofits as well. So the World Wildlife Fund. And that was an amazing experience from the point of view of partnerships. Really, this idea of you can't do it all by yourself. You have to go with other organizations that are willing to work with you. And there we actually had some really great partnerships, like, for instance, at the time with Twitter, for instance, we had a Twitter bot that actually looked at people's Twitter feed, saw ones where their emojis were their endangered species, and then we tweeted them and say, hey, do you want to become kind of a spokesperson for WWF around that? And so that was a really great example of taking the brand, a trend, like, for instance, emojis at the time, and then bringing together the technology to actually make it happen. And so, as you mentioned, the last thing I've been really focused on is more on the digital transformation side of things. And luckily, my roles recently, that's employed AI and actually bringing that to the whole organization. So really giving people the skills, giving people the confidence and how to actually use this technology to actually further the goals of the organization. So yeah, so it's been a whirlwind tour. And I would say one last thing is that I think where I'm going to next, it's a case that's lecturing and the like. And, that's really goes back to one of the things I really feel is valuable for everyone in these days is actually this continuous learning. It's a case that the world is changing so quickly. We need to keep up. And that's a way to actually to do that, to always be looking at how to learn. And that's not just taking courses, but it's a case, of course, like, like day to day, looking at our feeds, looking at who's interesting in our field, and actually always then collaborating with people to figure out what the next big thing is and how to actually apply it.
You mentioned this tweet. It was very interesting, and I'm sure it made an impact as well. What I read in one of your articles that interviewed you, that also while working at Roche, you also managed with AI to cut down time of, I believe it was clinical reports from 12 weeks to, was it 10 minutes, 10 hours? You can tell us more about it. So it's really, at the end of the day, technology should make our lives better. So my question to you is that you've described 3 waves of AI adoption: experimentation, exploit, and enlightening. The 3 E's. Can you walk us through what that means and why most organizations seem to get stuck at this experimentation without really moving into the impact or this enlightenment from the technology?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think that one thing is that we all stand on the shoulders of giants. So like, for instance, Alex from Strategizer, the first 2, experiment and exploit, are from his methodology. And then I add Enlightenment, because I think that one of the key things today is that a lot of companies, and on the flip side, a lot of employees really look at this as an efficiency ploy. And having said that, there are lots of good examples of that. You mentioned one. And on the other hand, it's something where I think it's a lack of imagination. And that's one of the things that we still hold that, people are better at AI about. I mean, really new things. And, looking at how do we actually, grow the top line? How do we actually look at that? And, I've got a good example of that, 2 Swedish firms. I mean, one of them is Klarna, and they came out and said, we're going to get rid of our customer service people and replace them with a bot. Get rid of 700 jobs. And then they had to
now
pull the
they
people
came
back.
back.
Exactly. And then on the flip side, another Swedish firm, IKEA, actually had a different attitude. They actually used a bot, but then they actually looked at it from the point of view of, hey, we've got customer service people. They know our products in and out. What are we going to do with them? We're going to retrain, I think it was 8,500 customer service people, and they put them into a situation where they were doing virtual consultations online. And that actually generated $1.3 million worth of revenue. So that's the kind of thing that we need to see more of. How do we actually do something better? How do we allow people to thrive, not just, get a couple of cents on the dollar from the point of view of efficiency gains? And going back to your point, and when we started this conversation and this question, experiment is really sometimes about that, is dimes on the dollar, and it's not actually looking at the big picture and what we can really do it. So I think it's a good thing from the point of view of a starting point. And but you get to a certain point where you have to say, okay, one of these things is actually going to scale. Where do we put our real focus as an organization on it? And then how do we actually, exploit that to actually get, like I said, better top line, better bottom line as well, of course, but all those things together. And, we really have to be broad and, again, use our imagination.
You provided a very good example. And I, by the way, had on the podcast, on the show, also somebody from IKEA talking about skills-based approach to, basically training all the floor workers and everyone on using AI and generally like designing trainings that's relevant for them. So also putting human in the center of the business and not like kind of outside of it. You mentioned as well some of the layoffs. So I think it concerns many people right now, right? And we hear also many stories just a couple of weeks ago that stock market went down for several SaaS companies because investors predicted they don't need analysts anymore. They might just need, instead of 20 analysts, 5 analysts with a Claude account with an AI, right? Can you tell us your opinion? So shall we be scared about the jobs, or do you have a positive outlook? Do you believe AI is going to create more jobs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I definitely lean towards the abundance mentality, but with a balanced approach. So it's a case that, if companies are looking at it and say from top down, this is an efficiency gain, then, what's going to come is going to come, naturally the knock-on effects will be when AI is actually able to do certain types of work better than people or good enough, then it's going to be a classic disruption play. Having said that, again, I really believe that this is a lack of creativity. This is something where, there's not many businesses in the world where they cannot expand. And this is a great way to do that with people that know the business. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, you're going to need certain types of new roles. And again, like the IKEA example, do you have people in the organization that are willing to upskill for those? The other
Mhm.
opportunity, which is really great as well, is that in certain circumstances, the roles become unbundled. And then when you look at rebundling them with AI, you don't necessarily need someone to have such a high level of education or experience. And then sometimes the AI can actually help with that as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. And that's the way I like to look at it. But it definitely it's something where we need to be wary of the fact that it can go into a very dystopian direction. And
Mhm.
I really believe as well that you need to be critical about what you're hearing. If the head of like these AI labs, like for instance, especially in the US, are talking about, getting rid of jobs and things like this, that's actually to their benefit. I mean, they're actually the ones that are actually going to capture the value from that. So you need to be very critical as well where the source of that is and what their alternative motives would be. And that's again another human quality, critical thinking.
Dave, you were talking also about efficiency gains from AI, and we already see, in fact, some efficiency gains. Companies are seeing some data from Adecco, I believe, mentioning that AI saves people 2 hours a day, but I believe there is also a big expectation gap. So if AI saves me 2 hours a day, it's at least 10 hours a week and maybe more. So what is expected to do with this freed up capacity? And I think there is also sometimes lack of communication from management, right? On the other hand, we see studies that show that people tend to take more work and more work and more work, and which leads to burnout at some point. There was also a recent HBR study on it. So it's not long term. Also, it's not very sustainable. How do you see this play out inside enterprises, inside organization, and what do you think should the leadership approach be?
Yeah. So I then, if you look at it from an abundance point of view, then part of it is actually, you will gain benefits from it, and
Mhm.
this should actually put people in the situation of actually having some more time. And with that time, they should be looking at doing the things that people are good at, having relationships, going deeper, asking the right questions. These are key things that us people we need to keep doing. And also with that freed up time to actually continue learning, to kind of share the learnings that they get from things like AI and make sure that the actually organization is continuously learning and benefiting from that. And I think that's one of the key things as well is that a lot of organizations haven't upskilled their workforces. And I think that's
Mhm.
a big gap. And because of that, then people are fearful. So management, leadership actually has to really come out and say, well, what are we going to use this for? What's our purpose with this? And again, if they're looking at just bottom line, I mean, no, that's really not where you see the best use of that resources.
So what would you say the timeline should be? So first, getting these new tools and then upscaling and then communicating, or first communicating or transforming. So how would you see it, having this much experience in the transformation areas in big corporates?
It's a really tough question, and it's difficult to get it right. And I think, unfortunately, I will use the "it depends"
Hmm.
answer. So, in an organization that really is open, and it's a case that already, very much, a continuous learning organization and everything else, I think that would be a good thing to actually get the upskilling program ready first. And then, like, for instance, obviously, a part of that is the technology as well. Although a lot of these technologies are more or less interchangeable and always there's this, race between them. But it's a case that, like, for instance, they're doing similar things. And, one of the things I would say is that it shouldn't be something where it's a knee jerk reaction either. So, for instance, like, the CEO comes and says, we have to have AI and I want it by the end of
Hmm.
this year. That's the wrong way to go about it. It really should be something where it's based upon where the enterprise is today. What are the objectives? Basically, how are we going to use this and to have a think about it. It's okay to experiment with lots of different things as long as you follow the current way you go about, looking at these different types of software to make sure that you've got the risk covered off and you're looking at the right reward. So I think it's really important that leadership is very much involved with this, role modeling it, talking about it. And therefore, then people, and the studies show this, people will come along behind it because they want it in a lot of cases. And there's lots of studies saying as well that especially when ChatGPT came up first, there was a lot of people just using it in the shadows. So even though it wasn't
Yeah.
actually, approved or this kind of stuff, they were using it. And unfortunately, they were putting company information in there, which was not safe.
Yeah, I recently talked to also a leader from an organization, and it was a very anecdotal story. He said our company rolled out a challenge, AI challenge, and everybody could submit their AI use cases. So we didn't tell them like what use cases or what tools should they use. And then he mentioned they realized after people submitted the use cases that over 50% of the use cases were submitted not using the company tools.
Yeah, yeah,
Kind of
exactly.
not the enterprise tools, but kind of, as you mentioned, like kind of private ChatGPT account or, or Claude's account or any of that matter. So it was, I guess, a good learning for the company as well. But also, I think it's in every company right now, the case as well, the shadow IT or shadow AI right now, as you're
Definitely.
mentioning. When we think about AI adoption, and in some companies, obviously, it's they have a higher rate of AI adoption. Some companies are a bit behind. So what do you think differentiates these two companies? From what you mentioned is I heard continuous learning culture, also leadership support, or that senior leadership is actually driving it. What else would you say are the points?
Yeah, and I think that you had a really good example there as well, is that then it's like, if you've got the top management on board, if they're role modeling it, then you need catalysts. You need an army of people that are actually
Mhm.
saying, hey, this actually works. And I'm going to share how I'm using it. And I'm very curious to hear how you're using it as well. And that learning culture is actually what will actually make it take root and actually flourish within the company. And again, going back to the 3 E's, then you want to look at, okay, what are the use cases that we found that are
Mhm.
really going to change our business? Hopefully more of the top line side of things, but of course there's going to be some efficiency gains there as well. And look at end-to-end process redesign. And you have to have people on board. It's something where if they're not on board, they're going to resist. They're going to maybe even sabotage what's happening even. And because of that is something where you really want all people going in the same direction.
How do you make sure that that you get people on board?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the key things is that you, with these tools, I mean, you do have monitoring available. Like, for instance, so you can put up your dashboard and say, okay, these teams seem to be doing it really well from the point of view that they're following whatever we've put together. For instance, they're using the tools, soft things as well. Like, for instance, qualitative surveys to see where people are to start the baseline and then to see how you mesh against that going forward. And then you can course correct. It's really critical that it's not something where, you're just like, okay, this is the plan, it's in stone. You really always have to be iterating as well to figure out what works. And again, I think that one of the key things is, and there's a BCG study about this, that like, combine not just, kind of upskilling, like, traditional kind of classroom kind of thing or online training, but actually getting people's hands dirty with the technology
Mhm.
and sharing that in the teams. And that's where one of the great things to have as well as champions that are actually kind of
Yeah.
pushing that forward. The example you had there, a hackathon, these types of things where people really, you uncover who the power users are and the ones that believe in it, and not only the ones that are technically able to get something out of it. And I think that builds that force, that kind of army of people that will actually push it forward.
I think you mentioned many good insights. So from continuous learning culture to leadership actually driving adoption to having a team of AI champions or sort of role models who would be inspiring also the rest to use these tools and like internal promoters, let's say, of this transformation
Mhm.
and of the technology. But also you mentioned that use cases or trying to find use cases that are solving problems, like not just rolling out one generic training with just one same use case, like how to, I don't know, draft your email replies to all the organization, though it's important, but really looking at what use cases do the teams have? How can we use AI to solve these problems? And that's where, again, champions, for example, from the teams can help, right? They can be the first to identify it and to apply and to share with others, for example. Yeah, and being hands-on. So that's also what you mentioned. Basically, I think it goes together. The identifying the use cases, but also like trying to implement them right away and see the gains for yourself. Um, Dave, you talked about two models, the Centaur and the Cyborg. The Centaur draws a clear line between human and machine tasks, and the Cyborg blends them throughout. From your experience driving this across enterprise teams, which model emerges in practice?
Yeah. So this is actually based upon a Harvard Business Review study as well. And one of the things that's there is that they have different outcomes. But having said that, for a lot of people, the Centaur is a lot more natural. Like, for instance, they know that, okay, it can look at so many reports and look at crunching all this data and kind of coming back with a good response. And therefore, they just kind of outsource that part of it. And the Cyborg is much more iterative. So looking maybe at the subtask and saying, oh, okay, it's good for this, and then having interaction with it. And I don't know where the source of it was, but there was this really nice analogy where it said, like, Google is like a dog fetching a stone, or not a stone, but a book, or a branch or something like this. And, like, for instance, the large language model chatbots is more like having a conversation with a colleague. At the time, it was more like a junior colleague. But I think that that's exactly it. It's something where the cyborgs are kind of more having that interaction with the actual technology, trying to figure out what are the good things about it, what are the bad things about it. And in this study as well, Ethan Mullen talks a lot about the jagged edge. And it's not like a kind of a neat curve where you can see this is where AI is good and where the human is better. But it's something where it's jagged, and you have to kind of always be playing with it a little bit, experimenting to figure out what is going on there and see how it's changing over time as well. Because sometimes it gets worse as well. I mean, like, for instance, there's some really interesting things right now where people are saying, a year ago I was using this version, it was fine, and this kind of stuff. And now the new version, it's doing a bad job. So it's something where it's not a consistent thing that we can kind of rely on.
I think it also relates to this other aspect of where we actually outsource our thinking to AI and where we augment our thinking with AI. I believe there is also another model, which is AI as a co-pilot versus AI as co-thinker. So
Yeah.
co-pilot being when you like outsource the job, the full tasks to AI, and co-thinker is where you use AI to spot maybe the flaws in your own thinking or in your own decision, or you use it again to as a reflection partner, or as a mirror, let's say, to mirror your decision, to tell you where you might be wrong. So I think it's also an important mental exercise for each of us to try and understand, okay, where can I use AI to actually improve my thinking, not to just, outsource my thinking completely.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, this study has been updated last year, and they actually brought in pretty much exactly what you just said, which is actually this idea that, what are the things that we're just outsourcing to AI?
Mm.
And it also said as well, that depending on what you're trying to do, it might be fine to do that. Even from a learning point of view, is something where this is a productivity issue. Is it something where I have to get this out this second? And therefore, yes, you can actually say, okay, I'm going to let it do that. But there's also the downside of that, which is cognitive offloading. And it's a case that based upon that, it's something where someone's skills in that area will get worse over time.
Your motto is be human, not just human in the loop. I think it plays out nicely in this conversation. Can you unpack it even more, especially for leaders who would hear, okay, human in the loop, and think they've ticked the box on people's side of AI?
Yeah, and I think there's a really good analogy to that. So, like, for instance, if you look at actually, I did some legal studies in the last couple of years, and it's a case that part of human in the loop sometimes is just actually to tick a liability box. So, if something goes wrong, this person did it, and they are legally liable, and therefore the company is kind of covered. And again, this idea, this third case of actually, abdicating and outsourcing our thinking, this is something where ultimately, as people, employees in companies, we need to take responsibility for what we have actually approved. So having said that, this third case, like, for instance, if you look at the human in the loop, is kind of like in a car, the crumple zone. So when, there's an accident, there's a part of the car that actually compresses to take the damage, and in this case, to take the liability. And so therefore, like, for instance, we need to make sure that when we talk about human in the loop, we're talking about true agency, where someone doesn't just say approve, disapprove, but they can actually do something about it. And that's exactly why I say be human, because it's a case that, first off, it's something where then you have agency to do something. But also, second of all, it's like, for instance, how do we as human beings stay relevant and also, again, human? And so part of that is, like, for instance, putting our fingerprint on the things that we do, so that when you see something from a certain person, you say, oh, okay, I know this came from this person, not from a bot, let's say, for instance. And also, it's also like, for instance, if you look at a really great study that came out from MIT about what are the characteristics of people that actually, AI is still having difficulties with, and they call it EPOCH. And, the first one's emotional, the second one is presence. You look at presence, for instance, what we're having here right now, a video conversation, is actually sometimes even using AI, or at least, kind of acknowledging the fact that this is actually a certain important skill that we need to have, and then trying to increase that. Of course, physical presence as well, even more so. And the other parts of that as well are like, for instance, like opinion, which is around like, for instance, like, judgment. And again, taking responsibility for your work, creativity, and they use hope, but they also talk about, leadership and vision in there as well. So that EPOCH framework is quite good. And they actually prove that, like, for instance, they looked at 20s and 2024, and they could show that actually these EPOCH skills are the ones that actually have gone up in value, even post GPT.
Okay, so emotion, presence, opinion, and creativity. So we'll call it the future skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And hope as well. And that's where more leadership and vision. And again, it's something where, these are the types of things where AI can emulate some of it, but true EPOCH skills, it's still a human characteristics.
When you look at how organizations are approaching AI today, what's the one mindset shift you believe leaders most urgently need to make?
Again, I think that the first thing is like going back to this vision. It's like, what are we trying to do? And I hope that they're looking at this more as an opportunity to grow than it is to actually just be efficient. I think that that's the key thing right there and then. And then back to continuous learning. It's something where this is really like, if we free people up to have some time, then reinvest that in actually how we're going to go forward, but also in our human capabilities. And I think those are the key two things.
And I have two more Fireside, very quick questions for you.
Go for it.
First, what's the one AI tool you personally can't live without right now?
Well, that's a good question. I have
Just
to be honest
one.
with you. Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that I actually am using Comet Browser, which is Perplexity. But having said that, can't live without, but I don't trust it is the key combination. And I just have numerous examples where it's kind of gone off. And also it's been lazy as well. It's just like going like, it's like, okay, you've asked me to do these things. That's going to take a long time. And this kind of stuff. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I say, just continue and do it.
Okay. So how do you, if you don't trust it, do you go to incognito mode when you open, like, I don't know, bank accounts or some confidential information?
Well, having said that, I use it for very specific types of tasks, and
Okay.
I
So it's not your default browse.
No. But having said that, I found it very interesting that some experiments I've done with it, where it's actually gone into like a copy of a spreadsheet that I've done and written over columns, all these types of things. I'm like going, it's not ready. And having said that, it's some concrete examples, but also it saves a lot of time as well. So it's still a good tool, but you just have to watch it.
Okay, I got it. And the second question, what's one task from your career? It doesn't have to be now, but maybe if you think back, that you'd happily outsource to AI or automate it with AI years ago.
I would say most of my jobs with reporting. It's a case that
Okay.
And I think that that's something where really, there's a funny cartoon from Mark Tunis, and it's like, for instance, this idea of like, for instance, that, I need to write this email, and you give it a one prompt, and then it makes something big. And then the person on the other side is actually looking at the email and then going, can you give me a summary of that? And I think this is exactly the thing. Like, for instance, this is exactly the thing where those type of things that we do that we don't need to do, and reporting is a really good example of that, is something where that's what we should be cutting out. And that's where the end-to-end enterprise view of things is so important.
Yeah, thank you. So it's also a positive outlook to the listeners that AI can also free up your time for more valuable tasks, for more high level, and for tasks where you really enjoy your work, so that you like it more. And you outsource the things that we dislike to AI. Thank you, Dave. It was a great discussion. Can you tell the audience where they can find you and learn more about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So definitely reach out on LinkedIn. I've really, reach out to people and people reach out to me, and I'm very happy to connect. And it's a case that last year I did a lot of conferences, not so many this year, but it's great to connect with people. And so I'm very happy to do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.